back to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. Today, Paul Mencel is with me. Paul is a craftsman and the founder of the Philadelphia Table Company, a custom carpentry business specializing in handmade, one-of-a-kind furnishings. Paul has always been a creator, and before he got into building tables, he was a working musician. And this is legit. Paul's band, Bel Air, was signed by RCA Records. They toured the U.S., and they recorded an album in Los Angeles. Can you believe it? Now, the tables were just a side gig to keep money in the bank for when he got back home from the music gigs. But Paul has some business chops. He is constantly learning and he knows when to ask for help. When he started as a side hustle, he quickly grew into a full-fledged business grossing over $1 million in revenue annually with 6 employees. Paul says that everything he knows about business he learned by being a rock star. Right? So that's kind of fun. Creative businesses have a lot of overlap, and whether you are selling music tables or design services, you have to keep the business side of things in order if you want to keep working in your passion. Paul shares some of his insights into this today with a look in his own business and the lessons that he has learned along the way. I'm happy to introduce you to Paul Mencel. Hi, Paul. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hey, LuAnn. Thanks for having me.
Paul, I just learned that you were a working musician, actually a band, actually signed to RCA Records, and that this woodworking, quote unquote, and furniture making was your side hustle, and now this is your main business. That's a crazy thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nuts that this is what it kind of turned into. I mean, it was like when I was in a band touring, we'd go on the road or we'd be out recording a record, and you get some money up front, but you're not really making a ton of money, really at all. So I'd maybe be on the road. I started an Etsy shop, and then I would sell like one table while I was on the road, and then I'd come home and be like, oh my gosh, I got to hurry up and build this table so I could deliver it to somebody. And it was basically how I paid rent. The first table I built was actually for my wife in our apartment. And then it was just like turned into like friends and then friends of friends, and then did the Etsy shop. And it was just a way to support myself while I was, being a rock star.
That's crazy. I mean, what I'm laughing is the line that you said. Now I get home, I have to hurry up and make this table before I go back out on the road again. I mean, making a table isn't like a day project, is it?
No, it's not. And that's the funny thing. And a few times it was like we would be out on a 6-week run, and I would get order on, week 1. Oh. And I would be like, oh no. And I kind of learned how to do all my woodworking from my dad. So actually I had my dad build one of the tables for me because
you farmed it out.
Yeah, I started farming it out. To be able to get the stuff done.
Interesting. Well, it's funny because I was what's it called? Scoping. I was scoping. I wasn't stalking. I was scoping out your Instagram and your website, of course. And the work is beautiful. The tables are gorgeous. The furniture is gorgeous. And the one post I saw on your Instagram, really hit me between the eyes. I just thought it was an incredibly humble thing to say. You said, I started this company. I'm paraphrasing. I started this company. I was the one who was making the furniture, making the tables. And now I'm the least talented one on the team. And I thought that was a pretty awesome thing to put out there. But that was almost my had me at hello moment combined with your intake form, because I thought, oh, this is a business person here. This is a person who understands, and what I expected was what one little layer that you just said was, okay, I have a sale, I have to get it done, I'm not going to be there, let me get my dad to do it. It's like you see the chess game of business and you understand where your strengths are. And I've just put a whole lot of expectation on you, Paul. We don't know each other yet, but that's all the things I got from your intake form and your Instagram.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I love building businesses, and I just happen to also love furniture. And even when I was in the music business and in a rock band, I mean, you're building a business there too. Just instead of selling
Mm.
tables, you're selling records and you're selling tickets and you're selling songs. So I kind of always had that mentality of like needing to sell things. And as the company grew, I mean, a valuable lesson is like you kind of always want to hire people that know more than you do,
Mm.
or at least have the potential to become bigger than you, because that's the only way you're going to become bigger than yourself or make any company bigger. I mean, that's what, all of us as entrepreneurs believe anyways, is we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
build something that's bigger than ourselves.
Mm.
And in order to do that, we need to hire people that are bigger than ourselves. So I give my team a ton of credit. They're incredible craftspeople. I have an operations person who absolutely crushes the operations. So yeah, it's been an exciting ride. All started with me in my dad's garage.
And so what happens now? I mean, you mentioned even when you were in the music business, you were always thinking about the business end of it. So is it when you were doing it as a side hustle? You thought you were going to be a rock star. So you weren't thinking about making that a business. And then it started to become a business. And then you said, hey, that this is where the future is. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it was like kind of like one faded out as the other one was like growing at the same time. I mean, I didn't take money from the company there was a period when I was hiring people and wasn't really taking a ton of money for myself because I was like, I have to pay these people and basically figure it out as I go along. I mean, I never
Mm.
I mean, I did like little things like mowing lawns and like being a landscaper, but I never had a business with employees and all that stuff. So figuring all of that out was like quite a heavy learning curve.
How did you do that, Paul?
I mean, it was just basically trial trial and error. I mean, it was like
The hard way,
I
right?
always I always joke that I want to write a book that's everything I know about business I learned by being in a rock band. Because that's the situation is like you're driving to from Philadelphia to Los Angeles and you got to figure out how to keep gas in the tank, and whether that be, selling records or selling tickets or doing something to like help make some money to fill the tank.
Mm.
So it's just that at a bigger scale. I mean, you got to make sure you're paying the people. And I've always made sure I've paid my team before I pay myself. I think that's one of the most important things and a valuable thing that I've learned.
So, thinking about the valuable things that you've learned, making that transition. So, was it scary to make the transition and say, okay, we're going to turn this woodworking into a full-fledged business, or were the orders just coming to the point that it was, okay, we actually have a business, let's now put the framework inside of it?
Yeah, so for me, it was a little different than I think what most people start a business. It's like I didn't like leave a 9 to 5 job that had health insurance and stuff. So I'd kind of always worked for myself. So it slowly was trickling in, but there were a lot of times where I had to take big plunges as far as like moving out of my dad's garage and renting a garage. Like I was like, I
Mm.
guess I have enough sales for this. And
Mm.
at that time, it was just me and my brother building it, and I would call my brother to like help me move a table every now and then, and that. And then started getting to the point where I was like, all right, well, I guess I need to hire another person because these tables are pretty big and it's like hard to move these around myself. So once I brought someone else on, that's when you realize you're taking on the responsibility of that person's life in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because they're putting their trust in you. And actually, my first employee, aside from my brother, but my first employee is actually still with me today. So
Mm. So I
six
guess you're pretty
years,
good.
8 years later, I mean, he saw the vision, and I really respect him for that.
And the thing is, you're mentioning some of the very tangible things that we know and we recall as entrepreneurs that we have faced, where it's, okay, do I now rent a space to be in business? Do I hire an employee? But there's other things that go along with that. All of a sudden it's like, oh wait, and now I have payroll taxes, and now I have quarterly sales taxes. That's the
Exactly.
other part of it, right? And how did you navigate that, Paul? Did you instinctively know that you needed to get whatever team around you, or many of the designers, and I know you work with designers, since right now your business focuses, Philadelphia Table Company focuses on creating custom furniture for designers. So the overlaps of the industry, and you know the overlaps of the creative entrepreneur, where we tend to go, oh yeah, forgot about that part. So how did you school yourself in that part of the business?
So that was a really like a trial by fire kind of thing, as well, where it was just like kind of figured out. And it's like if I didn't meet payroll, I did, you don't. But as far as like figuring out like the payroll and the actual like data part of it, like all the analytical stuff, is just the same way as me hiring craftsmen. I just hired people who knew more than me.
Mm-hmm.
So I hired an accountant, who helped with a lot of that stuff, who then helped connect some of the dots. But I'm also an avid, book reader. I'm an avid podcast listener, which led me to you. I love learning from other people and listening. And, I'm a learner at heart. I went to school, I went to college and have a degree in chemistry and physics. So I like to study.
Wow.
I'm a big nerd in that sense. And I've gotten a lot of helpful information from this podcast and other podcasts as well that have kind of pushed me along the way, giving me different ways of thinking about things, and just always asking for help.
Mm.
I mean, I think that's one of the points that I brought up to you, was you kind of have to stay humble and admit what you don't know,
Mm.
and really just kind of ask for help when you need it.
And can you think about the situations that you might have experienced that you were in where you said, okay, this is a hand up moment, I need help here?
Yeah, the figuring out the payroll thing was definitely a big part of it. And then, very recently I moved to a much larger warehouse, and I now have a staff of 6. I quickly jumped from a staff of 3 to a staff of 6, pretty much
Mm.
overnight. So I had to reach out to other businesses who were similar to mine, and I have a little group that I'm connected with that really helps. We could kind of pick each other's brains on like how to do it. So yeah, and then growing up working for people, just having regular, the stupid 9 to 5 jobs. I worked for a small business owner, and kind of saw the way that he was doing things and running stuff. So I kind of picked some stuff up there, but a lot of it's been figuring it out and then knowing when you don't know what you know. You
Mm.
know.
Can you think of situations or an occasion where, I mean, do you have any and I don't personally process things as failures. I personally process them as, if I fail at something,
Hmm.
quote unquote, but I learned my lesson. Like, great, that was
Hmm.
my learning lesson. Is there anything like that that comes to mind for you where you're just like, for example, for us, I know the first recession that we faced at Window Works was, it could have been a failure to the point that we lost the business. Okay. In hindsight, it was definitely a failure of navigating and leading the business through recession. We came through it because we just were not going to not. Okay. But,
Hmm.
I know the difference now between somebody that isn't paying attention and somebody who is, the last recession in 2008. Vin just led us through it with very, very few bumps in the road. And not that we didn't have emotional lessons and emotional situations, but the business health was solid throughout it. So my point is that was, in someone else's mind, that would be You say how hard it is for me to actually say the word failure. I just realized I'm doing
Yeah.
all this. Just ask if there's a failure, because I just am like, I don't know. There's no failures.
Well,
So,
that's kind of how I was brought up too. Like
okay.
anytime I like made a mistake or something, my dad would be like, "Well, that's a $500 lesson in
There
how to
it
not
is.
on how to not pop your tire." Like it
Exactly.
was everything was just like, "Hey, this is a $5,000 lesson in, not to use this type of wood again."
Right. Oh
Um,
gosh, yeah. Okay, so
so yeah,
like
so
it's almost like I cannot say it. So you know what I mean? Is there
yeah, of
something
course.
big that you could share that someone else would learn something from?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a big thing is like coming right out of COVID. I mean, going into COVID obviously was very challenging, and that was just something where you just put your nose down and, like you said, you just commit to not giving up. You
I'm
just
not
say,
gonna die on the
you just
vine.
like, yeah, this is not how we go down,
Right,
right?
right,
It's like
right.
I see the ending. There is a happy ending here. It's just a matter of like getting through this. This is not how we sink. So like aside from going through that, it's like we had a ton like we actually ended up doing really well because everyone was in their homes. People were no
Yes.
longer
Right.
like people weren't going to work anymore. So people like a home wasn't just a place you slept in, like a home was a place you lived in,
Right.
which I'm sure a lot of your other listeners can relate to because I mean, you're now in this space all the time.
Mhm.
So like COVID at first was obviously very scary, then it picked up. But, actually subsequently right after COVID, because we were so busy, I ended up hiring people like crazy. I was still operating the business the same way I was with two people. Now I
Mm.
have six people. So last year was a big loss year for the company itself.
Mm.
And for me, that was just a kind of a big learning lesson of, okay, I really do need to take a close look at how I'm running the books. Before it was just like, hey, as long as more money's coming in than going out, I guess we're good, right?
Right.
But you know, if you keep thinking that mindset, you don't really have a good like I wasn't looking at my P&Ls. Like I wasn't paying attention to how much each project was running. I wasn't paying attention to payroll taxes, all that sort of stuff. So I brought all these people on. Just I was just focused on getting the jobs done. And when it was time to file my taxes, I was like, oh my God, the company lost like 100 grand this year. So for
Mm.
me, that's $100,000. I guess I could have gone to business. It was my business school, right? If I went to Wharton, I don't know how much that would
It
be.
was once 1 year at Wharton. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. So 1 year, I got my 1 year at Wharton, and honestly, it's like coming into it this year. I started going into. I actually ended up hiring a coach, like a mentor, who helped kind of pull a lot of that out. And I'm also surrounded by a bunch of other mentors too, who is like, hey, you need to start doing work orders. You need to start paying attention to like what your P&L is. You need to start paying attention to your expenses. Because I mean, the orders through COVID were just coming through the roof. I was like, all right, swipe the card, swipe the card, swipe the card, spend this, spend this, spend this. As long as we're delivering more stuff, we've got to be making money, right? And that
Ah.
wasn't the case. And the other thing too is I learned is I was trying to, I mean, we're custom handcrafted. Everything's built to order.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I was trying to compete with like the Crate and Barrels of the world. And it's
Mm.
just, I just can't live within that price point because it's not mass produced. It's made by humans. I mean, I'm sure their stuff also has some human stuff to it too, but I mean, everything's made one at a time, made by craftsmen that I pay well. We have a heavy focus on the environment and eco sustainability. All of those things come at a cost. So I really needed to dive into the books and be like, how much is this actually costing us? And
Mm.
I came out of that, you know, surviving. This year's much, much, much better. And
Interesting.
and setting goals too. I think that was a big part of it was not knowing the P&L. Like this year, I was like, okay, I want to hit 30% profit margin, and that's what we're on track to do.
Nice. And do you know? I mean, listen. First of all, high five to you, Paul. Number
Thank you.
one for sharing with us that. I know that many of our um, colleagues listening have had a year like that before. Many of the colleagues that have been on the show have had that, but very few people say it out loud. And so, high five to you for saying that, because it is true. I know when I do my chairman of the board coaching one on one and we get to know each other very well, I'm like, yeah, it isn't always, sunshine and unicorns at Window Works for 40 years. Like, seriously, there are years where we did lose money or we went without paychecks. It isn't always, you know, just the way. Like I always say, it's like J Lo in the Shape magazine or Victoria's Secret thing.
Hmm.
It's like even J Lo doesn't look like J Lo. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Now she's an amazingly beautiful woman. Don't get me
Yes.
wrong, but she doesn't look like the magazine, right? And
Yeah.
so I always, try and say, but it's very rare for someone to come on and actually share the nitty gritty of that. And I love it though because you follow it right up with the action steps that you took to not have it happen again. To really look at your expenses, to understand how to look and read and actually pay attention to your P&L, and to setting sales goals and margin goals. And then the other thing was that you said you had to really, understand, are you selling your products at a profit? Maybe
Hmm.
previously you looked at it, I have no idea the price point of your tables, but let's just say, you thought, oh, that's $8,000 for that table. Seems like a lot of money. But if now you learned that it cost you $9,000 to build that table, well, that's just insanity, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was just listening to one of your podcasts where you're talking about the billing hours
Mm.
versus like the flat rate fee, and
Oh,
it's like,
Michelle Lynn, probably, right?
yeah. And so like it's like very similar to like what I was doing, where it's like, you meet with a client, you want to give them the table, but then you're like, I don't know how much this person has. So then you like end up undervaluing yourself, which is not just undervaluing yourself, but it's also costing the company. So
Mm.
it's like when you now start to see like these are other lives, like these other employees that I have, like by me, changing this price for this one person is affecting essentially these other six lives. So it's like you really need to like dial it in and get a formula down to say like this is what we need to be profitable. And it's you get a lot of no's at first. I mean, we had to bring prices up and I was not used to getting as many no's as I was getting, but
Mm.
the level of client that I ended up getting was so much better. I mean, we had it's the people that like want it now versus like, squeezing somebody into something.
Isn't that see, you know what? That is something that I would say probably every business consultant that has been on the show has tried to express to interior designers is when you are willing to say no to the client who literally, you know, is saying to you, I have $5,000 and you want 10,000 for this. That's not your client. And when you
Hmm.
do say no, so you're explaining, it was, and I can hear it. It was probably a tough thing to do. You just said,
Hmm.
I was accustomed to getting more yeses than nos, and now you are getting more nos than yeses. But the through line, the result is that the yeses are your ideal client and they have a better appreciation and they probably are much more enjoyable to work with, right?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean,
Mm.
it was to a point where it was like I was at one price point where clients would be reaching up to pay for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, it's like, they're expecting the table to like dance and sing and like do all of this stuff, right? But by literally just bringing the price up higher, you're now into a market where people are like almost like buying down for the
Yes.
table. And it's
Yes.
also, and then the other thing too is the people who are willing to really like commit to something that's costing the amount that it should, they really understand the value that's going into it.
Mm.
So they understand all of the things that are behind it. And I try to do a really good job of educating all of our clients to say, hey, this is the price point, this is why this is the price point, and this is why I think our product is potentially better than these other products. If we're not it if your price, if our price point doesn't match your budget, we're probably not the company for you, and that's okay. We'll catch you on the next one.
Right. And you said it right in there. You have to know why your product or service. So an interior designer, their design skills, they have to know, we have to know why our product or service is worth it and be able to educate the consumer on that. If they get it, great. If they don't, see you buy.
1,000%. I mean, I'm a big fan of Jen Sincero. I don't know if
Mm.
you've read her books.
Mm-hmm.
And one of her books, she talks about that whole of like, don't devalue yourself
Mm.
because all you're doing is you're bringing everybody down in that situation.
Right.
I mean, you need to know what your worth is, and you need to hold firm on what that worth is. Even for family and friends, because I think family and friends is where it even starts to get a little stickier and trickier
Oh,
because
yeah.
everyone's looking for a deal, but then it just leads to resentment on both ends
Right.
because you're
They think they
resenting.
paid too much already because they're not used to paying the
Exactly.
custom prices that you have. And here you've given them like a 90% discount, and it's still twice as much as they ever would have gone at that Pottery Barn and bought it. And nobody gets it. Everybody's upset, right?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, that's basically that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's just you just kind of need to like, I don't know, have boundaries and be able to accept no's. And that was a really hard thing for me to learn.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a interesting thing because it is a hard thing to learn. But what I have found in my own, sales all through the years, and with anybody that I have a good conversation with it about, is it's once you've experienced the no and you've lived through it, you gave your price and they said no, and it was a good price and they said no. And guess what? The sky didn't fall. I still got up
Hmm.
today. I still
Hmm.
functioned. I did all the things. And then, more importantly, when you've done it enough to the point like you expressed, now your ideal client is finding you because you've up leveled, and now they see that, and all of a sudden you're in that world. It makes it, it's what do they call it? It's like positive reinforcement behavior, right?
Of
Once you
course,
have it
yeah.
a couple of times, you're like, okay, this is going to be fine. I'm going to be fine, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, I mean, we need to all be honest with ourselves. All of us are in a luxury market, right?
Yes.
So it's like you need to be operating at that level because it is a luxury to have someone design your house. It is a luxury to have a custom table built for you. And it's okay to be pricing things like that at
Y-
that price point.
You're 100%. It's funny because I just turned in my latest article column for Window Fashion Vision magazine, right as we are recording here. And it comes out November, December. And the issue this November, December, the theme was luxury. And I literally wrote in it that I got news for you that window treatments and interior design are not a necessity. They are not a
Mm-mm.
necessity. Like, the definition of luxury is something that makes your life more comfortable, more pleasurable, more desirable, makes the life or situation, but is not absolutely necessary. And you look, you can cover your windows with craft paper. You can
Mm-hmm.
go to a box store and point at a sofa, love seat, and two end tables and a coffee table and have it delivered. It is literally by definition a luxury. And you have to we have to. I was like talking to window treatment and interior design professionals in this article. That's the first obstacle. When you get over that, then you can move into the next conversation with your potential client without all the emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not trying, like you were saying, like, you feel bad if they can't afford the table. I feel bad if I want them to be able to enjoy this beautiful luxury piece of furniture. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not your mama. I don't feel
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah,
Right.
and like the hard part for me too was like making that switch of being like, hey, this is a luxury. Because when I started the company, I was like, I want to make a table, I want to make furniture for the people. Like I want to make
Oh,
better
that's very
furniture.
cute, Paul.
I wanted to make better furniture for the people. But
Oh,
then like once you get in, you're like, oh, okay, like that's why those tables are expensive because it takes a lot of time and money and that sort of stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then the other thing that got me through all those no's was just like really like meditating on like the whole idea of like abundance theory, where it's like
Mm.
there is always going to be work. And, there's as entrepreneurs for all of us, I'm sure all of us are like, well, I guess that was our last job, right? Like, I mean, we all go through those phases. So it's really helpful to just like constantly tell yourself like there is more coming. There's always more. Like
Hmm.
always, always, always more.
There is always more, and there is enough for everybody.
And that's my big thing too, is there
Yes.
is enough for everybody. I'm very anti everyone competing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't do it, I try to refer it to somebody else or whatever. I think there's, high tide raises all ships is
That's
what I
right.
think of
That's
it.
right. That's right. And there might be some woodworker coming up along that hasn't reached your level of workmanship yet and price point. And you know what? They're happy to take the project with the other person, right? And it's
Of
funny,
course.
yep, because it reminds me too. part of what you said in there when you were talking about saying no and then the ideal client coming along. I can remember years ago having a conversation with a designer who was saying we were talking about raising her rates. And it's one thing if I want to have a philosophical conversation and, any designer, I honestly, I could challenge, to me, I don't care what your rate is, you can raise it. I know you can. I don't care if your rate is $375, you can do $425. Like I just know you can. But when a designer is under $150, that really troubles me. That really, and I get it if you're a minute out of school or you're transferring careers and you really, that your wheelhouse is the best thing that you can hope to do is pick the right paint colors and maybe point at the right, fabrics and furniture from a showroom, then okay. You don't have your chops yet. I get that, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that just because you say you're a designer that you can charge $150 an hour. I am not. You must learn your skills, okay? But there is a point when someone is doing it, whether it's 1 to 3 years, and they do have a body of work, and there is some actual knowledge there that is greater than the average garden variety consumer's knowledge, okay? Where 85, 100, 125 is just not enough for that skill set. It just isn't. And what's so funny is we were having this conversation, and I think they were at like 195 or 115 an hour or whatever. And I encouraged them to go to like 145. And we come back the next month and we're talking again, and they're struggling, they're getting the no's, to your point. And the next month, and I finally just looked at it, I said, and it was somebody that I knew could design. See, I'm very clear on that. You have to be able to deliver. So don't just like, hey, I just put up my shingle and let me go right to 175, yeah. Right? But I said to her, you know what? Do 175. And she's like, you're out of your mind. I was 95 and at 145 people are saying no. I'm like, just humor me. 175, do 175. The next 2 or 3 months, full pipeline. Because what happened, and there was 2 things happening. Number one, the designer was afraid of leaving behind the people that she was working with at that level. And I get that. And that was one mindset problem. But the other thing is we had to get her, because her skill set had evolved, we had to get her to the point that people who trust the price point would buy it. You see, educated consumers do not really think they're going to get an elevated experience and elevated design for $95 an hour or $75 an hour. They see that as entry level. And once you have gotten your skill set past entry level, you've got to charge at the level that next level consumer will respect.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think it is a respect thing, and you mentioned too about like a mindset thing too, and I think that's a big part of it. And going through this time that I told you last year where we lost money, this year going into it, I was like, I don't think I could raise money. He's like, I don't think I could raise prices. That's not what my clients are. And sure enough, you did. And I just throughout this whole year, it's just like slowly creeping up. Obviously there were like, lumber delays and all sorts of stuff like that. So prices then had to go up there. So lumber prices went through the roof, and I was like, I don't know if they can handle it. And, every time I'm surprised. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I could go more. Like you could just kind of keep ratcheting it up.
Well, I'm sure there was a point where that a similar thing was probably happening. So a sophisticated consumer that understands the value of handmade quality custom furniture, there was probably a point where one of those people along the line came across you and looked at the price of a table and thought, that can't hardly be that, because I know what that's worth. And they probably moved on, and you never even knew that you missed that client, because it's like the educated consumer that's worked with a designer before. If you've accustomed to paying, like, look, if I've paid $225 for a designer and somebody that I like their Instagram, their website, I meet them, they're $175. I'm like, okay, I'm making a bargain. This is awesome. But if I've previously worked with a designer and it's been $175, $225, $245 an hour, and I see $75, I'm just like, you're not for me. I don't even know. You could be better than all of them. You see? But I always say it's like when we shop for a house. We tell the realtor we want to spend, $500 to $750. She doesn't show us the houses for $100. She doesn't. Yeah. We might find a beautiful one, but we don't look at them because we just are pricing in, shopping in price points, and it happens with everything. And so when somebody lands on a gem like you, I'm not saying there isn't that sophisticated consumer out there that might go, like a year ago,
Hmm.
I know the value of that table, and that is underpriced. Yay, we're making a bargain here. But
Yeah,
mostly they're not even going to look at you because they're looking at the places where the price point is what they expect it to be, right?
of course, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing that you said in there that I think is very important is to recognize that when you do take on the responsibility of employees, that what you learned is that you do have to also have the responsibility of understanding that you are selling at healthy, profitable margins because you have mouths to feed, and they're relying on you to keep the business open. And if you're not looking at these metrics, at your margins and your P&L and your expenses, then basically it's like having kids and really, like, I don't know, maybe we'll have a house next month, maybe we won't, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's like it's your
Yeah.
job to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's like it's like there could be like this negative stigma around people who are like, we need more money, or we need to like make, more sales and all that sort of stuff. Like you see like the slimy business guy, like there's that stigma of like the slimy business person. But when you like really look at it, it's like you have no choice but to sell at a certain price. You have no choice but to make a certain dollar amount in order to be able to like support these people. Like, I mean, you're doing it, it's more like out of like a moral obligation than anything, really. I mean, it's like, you have to support these people.
Yes. Well, and it's funny because I've never ever thought of it like that. And I'm not suggesting that you have. I mean, but when you said, the slimy business person, it just wants more, more, more. I've always looked at it like the more we can create, and if I'm the rainmaker here, the more everybody gets and the
Of
more I
course.
support my people, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I want you to make an amazing wage. I want you to feel happy to be here. I want to be able to give you bonuses, all those things. So yes, I am going to rally you every single week on where are our sales? What are we doing? How are we performing? What are we giving our clients and our customers so that they come back to us? Because it's that whole, the rising tide with, rises all the ships, or however that saying goes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, and for Vin and I, we've always had that approach within our business too. It's, we're not like going to take all the money and run away. It's like let's do this. And also too, what we've learned, Paul, and you are in the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey here with this, fabulous Philadelphia table company. What you're going to find is that 15, 20, 25, 30 years out, you will have developed a company that has recognition in the marketplace of being a good company. And that will reflect on you, but it will also reflect on those employees that have stayed with you for many, many years. And when that name means something to your community that you work and you deal with, whether it's local or it's, across state lines, depending on how your company works, it's cool. It is very cool that people say, that's an awesome company to work with. And the thing that I'm trying to wrap together with that is, if you're not profitable, you don't get that result. You're not in business 40 years later.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just profitability. That was the biggest lesson I've learned is how important it is.
Yeah. And the one other thing I wanted to say about the things that you listed that you learned from the $100,000 1 year at Wharton Business School um, is your margin. You said that now you have a goal for a minimum margin of 30%. And I just wonder, where did you get the number? You don't necessarily have to tell me. I just
Hmm.
mean, is the number rooted in actual data? Because we find that most businesses should be at 35 or 40. Okay. And your business model may be different. And I would need the Vin man here to have him pick it apart to make sure it's the good model.
Hmm.
That's not my superpower. But you'd have learned a valuable lesson, and you have taken great steps to have it not be repeated. And I would just hate to find out that another year from now, it's like, dang it, the 30% isn't the magic number. So did you come up with that with some mentors or experts or your accountant, and you know it to be true, or it's just like maybe we were at 19%, so 30 is seems like all we could push for?
Well, yeah, so it was more just a matter of where we were at last year, and it was like, hey, this is what a goal that I think is reasonable to come to. And that and the fact too that's like trying to keep some sort of semblance of staying within the realm of what's affordable as well. But it
Mm-hmm.
goes back to what we were talking about before. I mean, it probably should be something that I need to increase more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so the way the business is run is slightly different. So it's like 30% at the end take home, but at the end of each project, the project needs to be making 40 to 50% profit margin,
Good.
to be able to pay for like the supplies, the materials, and basically just for cash flow purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's basically at the end of the day after, all of the overhead
Right.
things,
Right.
you know,
Right.
at the end of the year.
So for window treatments, we're looking for 54
Hmm.
minimum, and upwards of, how good are you, salesman are you, can you get to 60, 68 on the gross profit margin. And
Hmm.
then, that drip down, I think, see, this is where my brain goes like, what is that number? I've heard Vinny said it 1,000 times. I feel like the drip down comes down to, with all expenses and everything, 35 to 40. And so, but don't swear by me. If you're really out there listening and you need to know, go in the LuAnn Nigara Facebook group, ask me the question again. I'll walk over to the Vin man and I'll ask it from him, and I'll put it in there. I always deal in gross numbers because I was always in the sales function, not in operational management function, right?
Uh-huh.
And so for me, he just was like, Lou, he would tell me, you're looking at 60%. And I would like, oh, well, I'm going to do 65% gross. And then it
Hmm.
was many, many years that later that I actually listened to him give a presentation where he was talking to other window treatment professionals. And he's like, you got to get your salespeople out there doing like 52, 54% gross margin. And we like, walking to the hotel room, I'm like, you always told me 60. And I always, we'd always talk about how I'd be at 65 or 67. He was like, because I knew you could do it. And I was like, oh.
Shoot high. Yeah.
Well, because he just knew. He just point me in a direction. I always believed in our company, and I believed in our people, and I believed in our products. And when I've got my belief set, look out of the way because you're buying what I'm selling you. You know what I'm saying? Like
That's
if my beliefs are set about myself and my beliefs are set that you need it, right? Like I'm not going to sell it to if you don't need it. But and that's what he just said. He goes, no. You're a different little animal over there. We just, So I was always so focused on whatever he just told me to do, I did. And I don't always retain that operational gross
yeah.
the net margin number. So, but I do know, this is what I do know from being with him side by side all these years, is that it should not be a fictitious number. There is a way
Yeah.
to know what it is, and so that you are healthy and profitable. So, just encourage you to look into that a little bit.
Of course.
Yeah. So this is so exciting. And now just give us a little bit of information about the Philadelphia Table Company, because I do know that you are providing custom table service, custom furniture services. You do it for retail consumers, but you also are working with many interior designers. First thing I want to know is it based? You're based in obviously the Philadelphia area.
Yes.
Is it something only local, or that designers local to Philly, New York, New Jersey, Delaware can avail themselves of, or is it something that your model crosses, and you can, work beyond that?
No, we definitely ship nationally.
Oh.
The biggest part obviously is like Northeast area. So we'll
Mm.
go up to Connecticut, as far down south as DC is like kind of like our normal operating.
Mm-hmm.
But we do ship nationally, make sure we freight ship it and get it there. But our white glove service goes pretty much up to Connecticut and down to DC.
And what is the process like? Does somebody, they pick a model that you have, or they work with you? I know it's custom, so I imagine if they want something designed from their brain, that's probably possible. But if they're just like, I just want beautiful handcrafted one of a kind piece of furniture, do you have set styles and models available? Like, how does that work, Paul?
Yeah, so we have a few designs that we've come up with where sometimes people will just pay us to come up with some sort of idea. We'll present a few ideas to them, and they'll end up, liking it, and we sell it. And usually we'll be like, "Hey, this might be a popular idea or a popular design." So we'll put it on the website just kind of as like a standard model. That's more just a place to like a placeholder, really, or like a place to starting point. And then other after that, a lot of clients will go through. A lot of just like homeowners will go through our Instagram or our website and be like, "Hey, I like this top with this bottom, yada yada." On the designer side of it, a lot of designers will come to us like, "Hey, we really like this table from Restoration Hardware, but we want it in better quality. We want it at this size. We want it in this color." So
Mm.
we'll do a little bit of that kind of thing too. And then on the architect, designer, commercial side, we do a lot of stuff for bars, restaurants, hotels as well. So we'll do, custom bed designs for boutique hotels, or
Mm.
they need, 52 two tops for a local country club, or, a not local country club, or we need like 150 desks for this place in Boston. Here's the design. Can you fabricate that?
Wow. See that surprised me because that seems like I'm going to use a fancy word that I learned from the podcast, like a value engineered product as opposed to a handcrafted, custom made product. Like, I mean, am I just not understanding the marketplace?
Well, so we have kind of both, we go kind of both ways. But we do make sure at the end of the day, the main thing is everything is made with solid wood. 90% is eco-friendly, non-toxic. The only reason why
Mm.
I say 90% is sometimes you have to use conversion varnish for commercial type stuff.
Okay.
But a lot of those big mass orders are still made in our warehouse, still made, one at a time. So it's more of like the boutique, elevated, commercial. I mean, yeah, commercial type spaces.
Okay.
Some
Okay.
like the high end New York City restaurants, Philly restaurants, DC restaurants, that kind of thing.
Okay. Interesting. So interesting. And I crazy question, is your wife super glad that you're not a rock star traveling the world now?
Yeah, she's very glad, and she gets a lot of nice furniture. Although she gets bummed because I openly admit that I'm the worst craftsman. So she's like our house is filled with all the rejects made by the worst craftsmen. So,
She's keeping
but
you honest.
yeah, I mean she's a great support. I mean, before when we were talking about all those things, jumping into stuff that was scary, like getting a showroom or getting a warehouse or something, she's like, "When have you not figured it out? Like
Aw.
you've always somehow figured a way to figure it out." So,
Oh, I just fell in
she's
love
been
with her. I just fell
she's
in love
been
with her that moment.
she's been very supportive.
See, that's so awesome. When have you not figured it out? That's an awesome, awesome thing to have someone say to you, right?
Yeah, she's been really great
Oh,
through the whole
that's so good.
process.
That's so good. Because you know what? Her life is on the line. So, she could be like, I
Of
don't
course.
know, blah, 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 but to be that support for you and that voice in your head that like, oh yeah, that's right. I get things done. I can do this, right?
Yep, I'll figure it out.
That's it. That's awesome, Paul. I have to tell you, I've really enjoyed meeting you. Just so grateful that you listened to the podcast and that you wanted to be part of it. And I think that your insights are very helpful and do transfer to interior designers. So thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so even if you get a contract to tour as a rock band, you might still have to come home and do your job on the side, right? That's crazy, right? But in doing that, Paul found his true passion. Entrepreneurship isn't just business smarts, right? It takes a lot of creativity too. And it's clear that Paul has a good balance of both, and now he's utilizing both. All of the years in the rock band taught Paul a thing or two, and he was able to transfer the skills of selling songs and selling tickets and keeping gas in the tank into his woodworking business, selling tables, growing into bigger and better workspaces, and hiring a talented team. That was when I knew that Paul really has a talent for the business side of things when he said he is now the least talented member of his team, because that means he gets it. He understands how important it is to hire people that are more knowledgeable in their areas than you are. He has transitioned out of the hands-on carpentry for the most part. He's hired better craftspeople, and he is crushing it on the operations side of the business, right? Crushing it. He recognized where his strengths were and was able to pivot into a different role, which in turn benefited the business. What Paul really has going for him is his ability to learn from his mistakes. He isn't afraid of trial and error. Personally, I've had a hard time saying the word failure, right? I've told this to you guys before because I truly, really, truly believe ultimately that every misstep, mistake, failure is an opportunity for growth. And Paul shares that belief. Everything is a lesson for him, and he has learned some pretty big lessons. We all have. You don't escape it, right? But I love that he can admit to being so focused on getting the projects done and the work out that he didn't realize the business was losing money, right? Until tax time. We've heard that story on this podcast before. He's not the only one that's happened to. Okay. So, but it does take a lot of courage to admit it. And I congratulate him on doing that. Right. It's more common than you would believe. That's what I want to tell you. However, hopefully, because you listen to this podcast, if it hasn't happened to you, it won't happen to you. Right. He even joked about that his business school education, is right there. But that's how it goes sometimes. And you pull up your pants and you don't make the same mistake again. At least if you're smart and you're paying attention. That's the goal, right? After that, Paul knew that things had to change. So he hired a business coach and ultimately he changed his mindset, focusing on the profitability of his business. He referenced that recent show with Michelle Lynn, number 814, who in that episode we talked about billable hours, but also about knowing your value. This is an important topic. You have to understand what you are worth and why. Right? Another episode that I love that deals with this is episode 672, one of our Flashback Friday episodes from years ago with Tiffany White, the Nappy Bohemian. She talked about the value of the work that you do, of you being the one to value it, and being careful not to compromise too much, especially in the beginning days of your business. If you missed that episode with Tiffany, I encourage you to listen to it. We will put the links for that and Michelle's show in the notes, okay? Now, with this shifted mindset, Paul understands that the type of custom furniture he is creating is a luxury and should be priced appropriately. This is a common mistake. If you've heard yourself in this part of the conversation, then you know you need to raise your rates. I would encourage you to go back and listen to episode 337. It's a Power Talk Friday with Fred Burns about setting and getting higher fees. Okay, Fred has been on my podcast dozens of times, well, maybe a dozen, and he knows what he's talking about. This episode digs into the ideology we create around our prices and why it's important to begin the process by appreciating our own value so that we then can raise our rates accordingly. Now, Paul sees this side of things now and is willing to accept more no's in order to get to the yeses of his ideal client who exists at his ideal price point, right? This is the key takeaway. People shop in price points. So, right, when you have the chops, and I know you do, then you price your services accordingly so you can take care of your team and continue to grow your business. It all goes back to understanding your value. Lisa Princik did a deep dive into this on a Power Talk Friday a while back, episode 696. So again, if you're struggling to define your value proposition, maybe listening to that episode, Lisa can help you gain the clarity you might need. All right. All important stuff. All of this ultimately leads to profitability, which ultimately leads to you being able to stay in business. And that's what we want for you. Okay. And this is where Paul is now, right? He is building his profit margins back up. He is understanding that there's always more work to come. He brings it back to the abundance theory. And he's right about this. There is always enough to go around. Always. Every single one of us are entitled to it. We deserve it. And it's there. And if it's not coming to you, then it's your mindset that's blocking it in some way, right? And Paul reminds us, a rising tide raises all ships. It's better for everyone, right? I love that he can recognize that and that he continues to grow through this. It's awesome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for these insights. It's been my pleasure having the conversation with you today. And I want to thank you for showing up. Thank you. Thank you. It's just amazes me every week. And I'm just so grateful that you do show up and listen. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Niagara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNiagara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.